Alcor is pleased to welcome you all to today's webinar, Source to Pay Solution for Business Leaders. During this webinar, our speakers will discuss how ServiceNow's S2P solution empowers business leaders to scale procurement efficiency by enhancing visibility, streamlining operations, and saving costs. For a quick organizational overview, Alcor Solutions is a global digital transformation services company serving Fortune 500, government agencies, and other leading organizations in multiple industry verticals across US, Canada, Europe, Japan, and India. Alcor advises leading businesses on cloud platforms, digital workflows, technology and robotic automation, enterprise service management, HR solutions, integrated risk management, and data and analytics. We also provide business process consulting to capture, re engineer, and improve processes that can easily be automated to deliver real value. Alcor is an elite ServiceNow partner, Oracle Modern partner, AWS partner, and also works with Azure, Salesforce, Tanium, and several other cutting edge technologies. Our ongoing webinar series is designed to inform, enlighten, and start discussions within your organizations. If you require any additional information after listening to today's webinar, please reach out to us through the website www.alcortech.com. We have time reserved at the end of the webinar for Q&A, so please feel free to type any questions into the question section of the webinar dashboard here. Our today's webinar is presented by Dean, who is Director of Product Marketing for Finance and Supply Chain at ServiceNow. Prior to ServiceNow, Dean was Director of Product Marketing for Era Technology and Director of Product Marketing and Solutions Strategy Marketing for Elementum. Dean is an advocate for aligning customer objectives with solutions, implementation, and behavioral strategy across supply chain organizations. He has worked with various Fortune 100 companies in pharma, electronics, automotive, CPG, and industrial markets to help institute a culture of empowerment alongside transformative supply chain technologies. We also have with us today Jennifer Rao, who is Senior Consultant for HAM, SAM, EAM, and S2P at Alcor Solutions. Prior to Alcor, Jennifer was an asset manager and IT procurement specialist for a transportation company and a university. Jennifer has worked with various clients within the manufacturing, medical, education, transportation, and retail markets to help drive change by creating policies and procedures around the life cycle of assets to better help manage tracking of assets and better manage IT spending through ServiceNow. To take it ahead from here, I'll now turn the webinar to Jennifer. Jennifer, over to you.
Demonstration, a Q&A session at the end, and just kind of overview of Source to Pay and how it can help within your organization. So before we get started, we were wondering for the people participating, are you currently leveraging Source to Pay automation in your environment? It'd be yes, no. Yes, but partially, or yes, ERP based only. So how are you currently leveraging Source to Pay automation? Give it a little bit longer for that. It looks like it's not a huge thing currently being leveraged in different environments. One big thing that Source to Pay enables within your organization is an automated end-to-end process for purchasing. Right now, I know a lot of companies have maybe your ERP system in place, might have a place where users can request, hardware or facilities type things, or just one-off areas for purchasing. And the Source to Pay kind of brings it all together where users can go in, put in a request to purchase it, have it automatically flow how it needs to flow for approvals, for, if it's a new thing in your environment, if it's something that you have punch outs for, it can automate that process for you. It also helps automate onboarding suppliers. So when you get new suppliers in your environment, you can onboard them into your system a lot easier. And it helps with the flow of being able to pay vendors, having vendors when they are having issues with invoices or want to check status, or end users as well. It kind of gives one place for all of that to happen instead of it kind of going through emails and people having to walk up to each other's desk to find out what's going on with these things. It gives you procurement case management, sourcing and purchasing automation straight through your shopping hub. So in a lot of times, companies have already invested in ServiceNow for, hardware asset management, maybe facilities, enterprise asset management, a lot of different areas where we've already done the work to have a place where people can request things. So it kind of makes it so you can actually have one specific place where everybody can go request whatever it is that they need. Everybody knows to go there. And you've already kind of invested in that area for people to use. It also gives you supplier case management for your suppliers and vendors you're using, lifecycle automation and workflows. So onboarding new vendors, contract management, supplier self-service, all of those things before that maybe you were stuck in emails or messages, stuff like that. It gives it one place to happen, a flow that's already in place to ensure that all vendors go through the proper channels and the proper flow of getting onboarded. It gives you the invoice inquiry management, invoice processing, document intelligence. So it helps also with when you're getting invoices to pay things that maybe aren't real invoices. It gives you that double check. If your invoices aren't matching what they should, it gives you a place where vendors can kind of go in and see what the issue is, why the payment's maybe not going through. So just kind of end to end one place to do all of these things. You can share information. It reduces the emails going back and forth. Maybe an email gets missed, something doesn't get ordered, and it ends up becoming an issue later on, or an invoice doesn't get paid because it's in an email or a message. You can have all those things in one place. You can log in, you can see it. You can have multiple people working on the same purchases because it is in one dashboard. So they can, anybody in your purchasing that you give access to can go in and see that dashboard. And users can see what's going on with their orders. They can see where it's at for approvals or if it's been ordered, the status on it in just one place instead of having to go back and forth and check and wonder what's going on with it. So it's really an end-to-end place to have automation, to have, checks and balances as well, making sure that everything that needs to happen when a purchase goes through or an invoice gets paid or a vendor gets onboarded, making sure that that process is handled appropriately and can be audited and can be seen and looked at. And then, Dean, I'm going to hand it on over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yes.
Great. I'm going to give a demo in a few minutes, but I wanted to kind of give a quick orientation. So there's a couple things. Oh, are you still sharing screen? We got lost.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. I want to kind of share two things that will help, but kind of see where we're coming from. So I think procurement's an interesting topic, as it really takes a team to do a lot of work in procurement. And there's two things I want to point out here is one at the bottom. So one thing that's interesting our customers tell us is the strength of our integration. We actually started in the IT space 27 years ago. And as we branched out from IT into legal into HR, one of our strengths is talking to systems and doing automations down below. So in fact, a lot of your current customers probably are using us tied into ERP systems. You'll see some of the vendors below. But as much as I hear that from customers, what I think makes us special is kind of our obsession. So if you look at that top layer, and this is really what I think has been missing from the market is really our obsession is, transactions are important, but what is more important is how human beings work together to accomplish tasks. And these are kind of in technical terms thought of as the workflows. And you can see there in the middle is the typical workflow of source to pay. But really, when we first built the product and how we look at it today is really from the top. So when we ask ourselves, how do we make the product better? We think about, okay, how do we make sure and make life easier for those requesters in there? And not just the specialists working in procurement, but could also be employees in the case of indirect. How do we also make sure that legals and contracts involved in the critical process, for example, working with suppliers, and make that as seamless as possible? How do I have finance involved to get that done very quickly, especially when you get into things like supplier onboarding? How do I make sure that ESG and risk is evaluated, not just in onboarding, but as also a continual analysis of my procurement flow and my suppliers to make sure my risk profile stays where I want it to be? And of course, then plug in the procurement specialists who have to execute on this and then be able to the vendor. So keep this in mind when you take a look at the demo I give you, is we're really looking at it from that humanistic perspective and then doing the automation down below. So Jennifer, hit the next slide. Now, if I was to kind of, put it into major areas as you look through the demo, there's kind of three major things that we'll do in source-to-pay operations. That's the request intake of, I need to buy something, either it is a catalog or non-catalog. It could be from procurement, whoever. We'll care of that process. We'll do the automation underneath to make sure that systems underneath are executing POs or invoices, et cetera. And also make sure that there's a process flow number 3 that's flowing through that. So not only are we doing the automation and the systems at the right time, but we're involving the right people. So if a manager needs to take a look at something, if there's an exception, the right person is looking, or I'm moving the next step, for example, ESG and risk. So these are kind of the main 3 buckets to take a look at as I do the demo. So next screen, Jennifer. Now, one thing I'll point out is talking to Jennifer and folks that there's probably a lot of folks on this call who are current ServiceNow customers. And what is interesting is this is a very fast path to getting automated procurement. So if you have an existing deployment, what you're going to find is a lot of the things you are already using, and this is from users familiar with using that interface and how they interact with it, as well as your specialist, are going to be reused in sourcing and procurement. So that if you have Employee Center, that's a familiar thing for customers. If you're working with playbooks, that gets used as well. Case management, all your data integrations, knowledge management, virtual agent, Now Assist, mobile, et cetera. All those things you're already using today, and you've got investment around on both the install as well as how users are using it, gets reused and makes really this a very quick way to do procurement automation in your existing ServiceNow environment. So I wanted to put that, and I will try and point out some of those modules as we go through. Next slide, Jennifer. Which I think is the demo. Yes. So let's do this. Let's get out of slides. Because you probably had enough slides for a while. So let's actually take a look at the product, and hopefully you can see my screen. And I'll do kind of a quick demo on what life looks like. So what we're going to do right here is start off. If you look at this familiar interface, a lot of this will look like something you already have. So for example, Employee Center. And you see source-to-pay operations, like Jennifer mentioned, kind of comes in 3 modules. Now, we usually assume we built it to be 1 module, but if you only want to do one of those, that's fine. If you want to just focus on the procurement side, you can do that alone. If you only want to do the supplier management, performance monitoring, that's fine. If you just want to do the invoice automation, that's fine. But let's look at this from an end-to-end demo. And let's go ahead and start with the sourcing and procurement operations. So let's take an example of Shirley here. And in this case, I'm going to show you Shirley, who knows nothing about procurement, which is pretty typical for a lot of folks, and how we guide her through the process of buying something. So you can see she comes into her familiar Employee Center, which she's probably using to do employee requests, like knowledge base. You probably already had that deployed. We now then extend that to do the concept of procurement automation. So of course, we have a section here that will give you insights into how to procure, give you knowledge base, but that's not exciting for a demo. So why don't we do this? Let's do what I like to do, and that's make things life simple. And I'm just going to go to virtual agent, and I don't have to be a specialist, and I can ask something very simple. I need to purchase something very human-oriented language. And in fact, we just integrated our generative AI. So you probably are more familiar with the term ChatGPT is kind of the consumer version, but we've got generative AI. They have those interactive experiences, so I can make it very simple. How do I need to purchase something? Well, it's going to say, well, what are you looking for? So I'm going to say, well, I guess I'm looking for a Yeti microphone. So I work in marketing. I might need to do this. And sure enough, so that in the process took a look at my request. Now, if it had multiple matches, it would show you that. If it didn't have a match and wanted to put it into a form, it would do that. But in this case, there was only a match. So it said, hey, you know what, Dean, I have exactly that. Would you like to go ahead and buy this? In fact, I can stay in this environment and go ahead and do a purchase. And this is going to guide me through how to do that. So it's going to ask me, well, where do you want this delivered? Well, I want to go to my Santa Clara office. Well, how many do you need? I need 5 for this specific event. Okay, that's great. How quickly do you need it? I need it as soon as possible because I am impatient. Why do you want to make this purchase? So this is your justification. Well, I need this for an internal event. So I need to buy the microphones. And sure enough, I can go ahead and take a look at the full request is now done. Everything looks correct. And then bam, it's gone off and kicked off the process. And we'll see this in a second where it's going. But you might be able to say to yourself, hey, you know what? We buy a lot of things that aren't this simple catalog environment. So how do you do things that are a little more complicated where we need to go out in negotiation? Well, like I mentioned before, we've extended that user experience. So I have a whole section here on procurement. So if you go here, I'm now in this whole section on purchasing and expense. And of course, I can see articles. You can publish things and help people get in there, include things like purchase cards, etc. But you'll see in this case, I need a new service. Go ahead and click on that. And it's going to walk me through a form here. That's going to give procurement everything they need to know about what I'm requesting. So I'm going to say, you know what? We have a major conference coming on. Again, I come from a marketing background. I need design services, so something a little more ethereal, not a catalog buy. I tell them my requirements. What's my justification for it? And it's going to go ahead and ask me questions. Now, this is fully dynamic. We're going to give you the default, but if you want to change it based on the product, based on your BU, whatever, you can do whatever customization, but this is kind of the default. I could pick out a supplier that's already embedded, or in this case, I may have been talking to one. So I may actually just say, you know what, I've been talking to Acme Services because they're used with Gartner. So they're kind of my preferred right now. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of quickly go through the rest of the details just for the sake of the demo. Even do uploads of requirements for the vendor, and then I am done. And so that's an example of taking something complicated and doing it very simple to where I don't have to call people and start wondering how I do these things. Now, you've noticed at this point, there's been no involvement in procurement. And right there, you're getting a lot of savings because no one had to call a buddy to figure out, what's my general ledger number, what's my account number, what's the process for you. I went ahead and did that. But let's go ahead and take a look on the other side of what it looks like for a procurement specialist. So we're going to go ahead and log in as Warren. And if you're a ServiceNow customer, for the experts, they have their own workspaces where we tailor their environment for their tasks. In this case, whole workspace around procurement. And you can see Warren comes in, and he's got an overview of all his works, his to-do list, things he needs to review. I'll scroll down here. And sure enough, and what popped in the background was this new request for that Yeti microphone. So I could go ahead and click that. And he saw all the information that Shirley put in. And you know what? For this one, I don't need to do a whole lot because it's pretty simple. I'm just going to go ahead and kick it off. And I love this button. This is probably my favorite button in here. If there's ever going to be like balloons going off, it's this one. So I can go ahead and hit this button, and I have now created a purchase order. So you notice I didn't have to log into something like SAP. I didn't have to know any T codes. It actually, when I clicked the button, went on before me, talked to SAP, took all that information, created a purchase order, and started to flow on its own. I didn't have to be a specialist. I can move on right to the next task. It's a lot easier. So you may be asking again, like we do complicated things, how you handle things like talking to a new vendor. Well, sure enough, I come back into the workspace, and you see Warren here has that request for the Gartner services. So what you can do in this case, saying, you know what, this is going to need a qualification with a vendor, so I'm going to go ahead and kick that off. What you saw were a couple things, and here's where also you get a lot of value in, is I've got now several teams working at one. So, for example, since we saw that Acme supplier was the preferred vendor, I am working with supplier administrators to reach out with them and start a conversation about how they work with vendors. I've also started a flow with contract specialists who are going to have to work with me to getting a contract set up for this vendor. I have also kicked off a conversation with my GRC team. So any type of review I need to do for security or ESG requirements will kicked off in parallel, as well as finance at the end to get them set up for payment. So I now have people working immediately in parallel to save time. And just to click on very quickly, I can go into the supplier side, which leads us into that second module, supplier lifecycle operations. So let's log in and see what it looks like for a supplier manager. So Alejandro works for suppliers, and guess what? Got his own workspace. So just like you saw before, he's got his one-stop shop to look for all his work, how our suppliers are doing, look at their performance. But guess what? Just like we saw earlier, I now have a new request for supplier onboarding with Acme Services and review. I could go ahead and click that, and guess what? The workflow has already started. So I can see here, one of the first things it did, it went back and looked at my background supplier information to see, hey, did we onboard them already? Maybe there's a duplicate. In this case, they saw nothing. So it says, good, and we're going to go ahead and move on. The other thing it will do, it says, you know what? I've talked to ServiceNow, and they have a relationship with some supplier information portals. And what we found is there's existing data on this supplier. Would you like to import that? So this is one option when you configure it and set it up, is to do supplier data integration. And then I go ahead and, rather than having to do all the complex integration, I go ahead and import data. And now I've created master data for the supplier. So I see all their key information. I see their news. I can even see their locations all in one simple spot. So I've made that very simple for myself. Now, one thing you may be asking is, there's a whole supplier part of that. I kind of see what you did with the supplier manager. Well, it turns out we have a collaboration portal for all things for the supplier. So this is an example for Frank, who's a supplier, has a portal. He can come in. And just like that experience you saw for employees, everyone else, I've got places for typing it or taking information about company policies, how to work with the company. But more importantly, for this demo, I saw that he has a couple new tasks that popped up as part of his flow. In fact, what he saw is a request for bank information as part of the setup for supplier onboarding, as well as the GRC that asked for their SOC reports so that we can review their security posture as part of the GRC. But I'm a supplier and I probably have my own needs, and I'm probably asking, what about my invoice? I could actually raise my own request. So here's another value, is I can actually start automating and making the smooth conversation with the customer, so they could submit their own issue and saying, hey, you know what, where's this invoice, blah, blah, blah. You probably see that hundreds of times a day. But actually, it's an interesting transition into the third module, which is account payable operation, which actually automates the whole invoice side. So we click on over, and it turns out, you guys probably, or you may not know if you're not talking to your invoice guys, is a lot of the invoices today are processed through email. So one thing we can do is, in here is the supplier can go ahead and send their invoices in email just like they do today. But what happened is, when the invoice is we intercepted that and we said, hey, we've got your invoice. We're actually going to process it. We'll update you as you see the next step, and we'll start the automation journey from there. So let's go ahead and start looking back and seeing what it's doing in the back end. And we're going as Gilly here, who works in accounts payable. And just like before, she's got her own workspace. Now, I will say that this is probably one of the more boring ones to demo, because most of this is purely automated. You just won't see this from a day-to-day basis. So what I'm going to do is kind of do this exception view, just so you see how it works in the background. And what you'll see here is there's 6 ingestion errors. So errors with the invoice coming in that had a hiccup on the ingestion. So it's just one of a few. And you can see in the background, you kind of get a sense of what it's doing in the background. So we actually use a combination between machine learning and deep learning we've looked at thousands of different types of invoices, and we know about where fields sit in an invoice type, recognize that, look for that section. Then we also run OCR to extract that and pull the fields. So some pretty deep intelligence there. In this case, let's go ahead and click and see what it did in the background. You can see we automatically read that invoice, put in all the information, but it turns out, sure enough, this specific information was missing a tax ID. So I could go ahead and fix that here if I knew it, or more importantly, probably go back to supplier and make sure that their future invoices have that clicked in there. So it kind of gives you a sense to stuff that appears in the background that is done automated that you may not see from day to day. So another thing that we do is we do the three-way match between the purchase order, the request, and the goods receipt. So as you know, there's things that get a good receipt because they're automated, but as part of your intake process at the yard or your QA system, wherever you're using for intake. But things like employees purchasing may not do that. So you may have an exception there. So I can go here and see that, sure enough, I have exceptions around good receipt. In fact, this was an example of someone who ordered a laptop, but they never confirmed that they got it. But what I actually did here is it saw that there was not a match. It kicked off automatically without me having to do anything, a reminder to the employee to go ahead and please confirm that. So actually, let's go see what that would look like for the employee is Paula. So Paula in her employee center would have seen her tasks and it would have said, hey, you know what? You need to go ahead and confirm whether you got this or not. Sure enough, I did. Sorry, I completely forgot about this. I got this a while ago and I'm done. And everything was automated. So you can see now we did 15 minutes, a full journey from end to end. You can start to seeing like where we focus on how the human beings within a process work together to get smooth handoffs, and not just that make their life easier, but they work in parallel. So I get things like supplier onboarding move from months to weeks to days, and then I get them in all of the seamless process. And so that's something unique about us is we're really going to make that human experience easier above and beyond the transaction underneath. And that is the end of my demo. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I think, Jennifer, I have one more slide before I turn it over to you. Do you want to go ahead and take over?
Sure.
Okay. And I was going to mention here, the candy on top is, if you're not aware, we are a platform company, which means that all of those tools are part of the deeper platform, which means this works at scale. And it also means if you're a customer, you're probably already doing the thing, using a lot of the modules. So if we have an update into how we integrate with SAP, it goes into the platform, which means that anyone doing the integration does it, as well as procurement. Another nice feature is we have our own ability for you, customer workflows, to develop your own app. So if you want to do something on your own with your own automated workflows with a user interface and do something closer to IP, you can create your own workflows and use all those modules. We have a ton of customers right now who are going around generative AI and using not only what we've done on the platform, but as well our third-party partnerships to very quickly put apps around generative AI. We have customers who have done their own things around procurement. And I think probably one of the cooler things is you have partners like Alcor. So almost all of our customers have used the tools in the background. So you didn't have to worry about being the expertise. And they've used the platform to then customize specific applications outside of what ServiceNow does, is what we're going to market with it into specialized areas of things like where Alcor focuses on, and to give you those additional services to make your life easier, but get additional value as a platform. So the big takeaway here is look at us as a platform company, look at other ways to create your own apps or have a conversation with Alcor about things beyond what you may have seen in the webcast. And Jennifer, I think that was the end of my section.
Excellent. So now that we've seen the demo and we've kind of gone through what this is, what it will help with your business with, the next question you might have is implementation. How long am I looking at? What does that look like? You know, it might look cumbersome because there's a lot of different modules and areas that can be implemented. One huge thing that's great about this is that you can actually take your time with implementation. You can choose to implement all three of the modules at once. You can do one at a time. And when you implement those, you can kind of walk through. A lot of our clients, we walk through where we implement kind of the most important things that you want. We set up your data connections. We put in, you know, your shopping hub, stuff like that. And then as you grow and as you're ready to ingest more and more features and more functionality, we're able to grow with you and help implement those next pieces, so that you're not kind of putting in everything at once. You can, but if you are concerned about that, you don't have to put everything in at once. We can put in different steps at a time, and then again, build with you and put in each of those additional features as you feel comfortable and ready to ingest those steps along the way. So it's one thing that really helps with being able to get it implemented, you know, being able to have that slow process. Implementations kind of come not as fast, but as fast or as slow as we kind of need them to. You don't have to commit to, you know, we're going to get this all in right away. We can take our time with it again and just kind of step into that. I believe that is all of our slides. We can move into a Q&A.
Well, I actually had one for you, Jennifer, while our audience goes ahead and chats in their questions. I think I wanted to not miss an opportunity here. You know, as we've chatted, I'm impressed with how much you're talking to customers and just how many implementations. So I think maybe for the folks out there who are trying to figure out where to start or like how to interface with the business, you know, when you look across all the different implementations, what are the kind of the bigger drivers, bigger trends that you're seeing?
I think one of the biggest drivers is the automation. A lot of companies have a lot of different groups that are doing a lot of different pieces, and there's no real communication back and forth between the teams. You know, I take an email, I do my part of the email, I send it to the next part of the company. You know, they do their part of the email, but it takes a long time. And this, you know, requests oftentimes are just emailed and emailed and emailed. This one big thing they want is one place where I can go and look and see, you know, what's being purchased from my organization, who's doing the purchasing from my organization, what vendors are we using, can we consolidate vendors? You know, if you have a large IT spend or a large facility spend or these kind of spends, you can sometimes consolidate down your vendors and start getting better pricing. You start having quicker turnaround time on a lot of your purchases, and it cuts down the manpower hours of chasing emails, chasing tickets. You know, how long does it take to buy something? You know, 6 weeks because it has to go through this process where clients need things a lot faster. Now, this is a very fast technology-based era, you know, and people need things quickly to be able to get their work done. So this makes it a lot quicker.
You know,
Awesome.
Jennifer, I do see one question here that came in from the side, and that was the question of, you know, what are you seeing as typical implementation times?
Typically for the beginning part, when we are implementing what we usually call as like a phase one, it's typically the quickest we do it is about 12 weeks. That gives us time to get the modules in, do the build out, connect to your ERP system, stuff like that. And then as you want more enhancements or more features in, then it will extend out the time. But typically our initial engagement to get everything set up and going is about 12 weeks.
Great. And I see we have a couple of questions in the question dashboard. So the very first question that I'll bring to you would be, what integration methods are available for connecting source to pay with ERP and supply chain systems?
Which integrations, like there's SAP that you can use, Ariba integrations are out there. Trying to
I was going to
think.
say we added Oracle as well.
Oracle's out there.
Yeah. I was going to say one of the values of the platform is if you go and like look at the ServiceNow website, you can see the list of our connectors, give an example of where vendors are. And then we've done integration on top of that for like SAP and Oracle to automatically their tables to do the automation as well. And we're doing some additional as we go. Maybe not some of the more obscure. So maybe if you're using a bond, you probably have to go through a partner for bond, but I don't know there are many people using bond anymore.
Some of the
Great,
ones,
thank
if the integration isn't available out of box, you know, we are able to work with some of them and create custom APIs to make this work.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jennifer and Dean. Another question that we have is, what kind of support and training does ServiceNow provide during and after deployment?
I know for training, there are source to pay trainings that are in there through the Now Learning. So anywhere from setting it up to each module, there's training around the different connections. So I know that training is in place. And then Dean, what kind of support is typically there from ServiceNow?
Well, support I usually have to defer to sales, but I will say one more about the service side is like I'm a user of ServiceNow. The nice thing about being a platform is I can Google any kind of problem. So I've set my own environment up, and I've used both the online learning modules from ServiceNow. Our partners have their own learning, or I also have their community-based groups where I can ask questions as well. So the service ends up being pretty straightforward.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to see many questions coming in. So next question we have is, what type of ESG and risk management controls are in place to validate the suppliers?
I can actually sort of answer that. So I'm not an ESG risk specialist. So I actually have a whole team of cohorts. And the reason why I mention that is we use the full ESG risk management module within ServiceNow. So all those programs come then available through source to pay. So if you're interested in there, have a conversation. We'll pull someone from that group to go in detail. It's a very widely used one with it. One other interesting thing I see there that's of value is a lot of folks are using it as not just that onboarding ESG risks. We saw it a lot. Germany had a new compliance requirement, and they're using it for updates. So this new requirement come in, I need you to fill this out very quickly, or I need you to recertify for the year. So it's actually a pretty common module. So if you have something specific, come grab our group. We'll grab someone from the ESG risk group for more details.
That's helpful. Yeah, thank you, Dean. And before I move on to the last question that we have here, I'd just like to remind everyone to please use the question section if you'd like to ask any question on today's topic. So, Dean, here we have the last question. Does source to pay solution support multi-language requirements for global operations?
Definitely. I can't give you the list right now, but we're a global organization, probably available on our website, but I doubt there's well, I shouldn't say I doubt there's a language. I don't think we're available on Klingon. We're probably the vast majority of enterprise specific. That would be kind of cool, though. Enterprise specific, yeah, we're multilingual, something we just build as part of our platform.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for the informative slides. Dean, the demo was insightful. That was really helpful for all the attendees here. And thank you for all our audience for being so engaging and active and asking questions and all. So thank you. And thank you everyone for joining. See you at our next webinar soon. So yes, Jennifer and Dean, have a great day ahead. Have a great day to everyone as well.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.